Welcome to the 501 Companion Podcast, an educational and news podcast for 501c3 charitable organizations that want to create better content, optimize their technology, and improve their marketing to better serve their mission. This is episode number 27, the fourth show of 2022. My name is Buddy Scalera, the Chief Content Officer and host of the 501 Companion Podcast. My career has been focused on digital marketing, social media, and emerging technologies like component content systems and NFTs. I'm also a professional writer working and teaching the craft and business of making comics. I'm joined by Sandy Miniutti, Chief Operating Officer at Family Promise, a versatile nonprofit executive with 20 plus years of extensive experience in public relations, marketing, fundraising, and strategic planning. She is deeply committed to advancing a vibrant and healthy philanthropic marketplace in which charities have the necessary skills and resources to solve our community's most pressing issues. Our guest this week is Tim Gamory, the founder and CEO of Elevate Digital LLC. He is an entrepreneurial and resourceful executive with 20 years of sector experience in designing, developing award-winning technology solutions for consumer and business-facing stakeholders. He has a proven capability for leading, motivating, and developing a staff with diverse backgrounds. Most recently, he was a board member at Family Promise and CEO at Bronx Exchange. Tim was a founding team member and technical architect at Charity Navigator, America's largest charity evaluator and go-to resource for philanthropists. Whew. Anyway, I'm going to just quit while I'm ahead. Tim, welcome to the show. Sandy, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And, it's nice to see you again, Tim. We met each other many, many years ago, and you're instantly recognizable. And when Sandy said this is a great guest, I was like, yeah, this is a great guest. So it's so nice to see you still working in the space.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, nice to see you as well, and appreciate the invitation. And I also remember kind of meeting with you at Ogilvy and the support and help you were giving us at Charity Navigator to level up our marketing capabilities. I think we're working on some website development projects and design projects. So that's very helpful, having that kind of those resources, helping a nonprofit take it to the next level.
Well, and of course, I met Sandy at the same time and never lost touch with Sandy. So she is the super connector for our show. Sandy, thanks for bringing Tim onto the show. What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tim's, and I got to work with him for like 15, 16 years. In the end, we even had matching stand-up desks next to each other, and it was great. I have a lot of admiration for Tim. I've learned a lot from him over the years. So maybe, Tim, you can start us off with telling us about your whole background and how your career progressed. I think it's really interesting for people to know how you can kind of navigate through the nonprofit sector and do different things and, build up your professional skills.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Appreciate making this connection as well through Charity Navigator, Family Promise. And it's such a pleasure working with you, and excited to continue to maintain this connection as we move around. My path is, there was no plan. It's funny because I was following signs, really. I went to college for video production because I did take a class in high school that allowed us to create a television show. And that really that turned me on. So I went to school at Marist College, video production. I thought I was going to kind of go into that, but then I heard about Teach for America my senior year, and I had already been mentoring and wanted to be kind of impactful and help make a difference. I was really appreciative of the education I got. So I went into Teach for America as a core member. I taught in the Bronx, where my family's originally from and where many relatives are, but it's also, the Bronx is typically spoken about in terms of deficits, right, and the challenges. So I wanted to be a part of Teach for America there in the Bronx. After teaching for a couple of years, I then joined the staff of Teach for America, the national office. And that was just an incredible experience, because I joined at the time when the idea of the alumni association, of like people who had done the teaching and were either continuing in education or going into any number of fields, but that idea of like, hey, let's keep those people connected as advocates for educational impact, that was brand new. So I was tasked with helping create the Alumni Association at Teach for America. And I was working directly with Wendy Cobb, the founder of Teach for America. So that was a tremendous experience. So I was there during this growth phase of the organization. And I really enjoyed connecting and building relationships. And then I also, because Teach for America was a nonprofit that was growing, the technology resources were limited there as well. So I became like the unofficial tech guy. People started asking me like, hey, Tim, can you do that? They got a sense that I was like really like into it. I'm always playing. I go home and I'd like start teaching myself, how to design a website and databases. That's really where like databases I kind of fell in love with there, because we needed to organize all the alumni information. It didn't exist. I had to create it. So out of necessity, which is very common in the nonprofit space, right? The wearing multiple hats and kind of taking on the ability to learn. So I really appreciated that, because I was able to actually dive into technology, Teach for America. And it was there that a colleague, Trent Stamp, who was also a Teach for America, he left and was tasked with being the first executive director of Charity Navigator. So he, after a couple of months, he gave me a call. And he called me and another colleague, Kyle Wade, to come on board and help create Charity Navigator. It was Pat Dugan, who was the founder, had this tremendous idea, saw this need, which was really powerful because he has no internet background. He knew nothing about the internet, but he just knew enough like, hey, that's the future. He just understood the concept and how to help make this information easily accessible so that more people can feel confident in donating. So I was really attracted because Trent knew that I was into tech, and he was like, hey, can you create website and database? I was like, I could figure it out. I was like, it's like, I haven't done this exactly, but I can figure it out. So jumped in to Charity Navigator, and that was such an incredible experience, being there from the beginning when we were calling, and then Sandy, you came on shortly after, when charities were still like very dismissive of us, right? And like calling it like, this is ridiculous. We're not going to give you information, because we were asking for it initially to send the 990s, or like, we can't do this. To seeing how our persistent efforts over time and our marketing was really key, I think, early on in our messaging, to breaking through and becoming helping to what it is today, a standard. It's a standard. It's funny coming across websites and seeing the logo, the 4-star logo on the bottom, and that's the version I designed.
Yep.
Because I was the designer and video producer, as well as the IT, and helped you set up your computer and everything. And Sandy, you were my kind of partner, because the communications and the marketing and the CFO, and we wore multiple hats, right? So that was 15 years at Charity Navigator. I then, after leaving Charity Navigator, took some time off, and I really was exploring like, how can I be of service? Well, that was the question. And where could I have impact? And I looked at the Bronx again, because that's where our family was rooted, and was still a lot of need, and was attracted to an organization there that was really looking at like the whole system and the whole economy, and like looking at root cause of inequity and root cause of poverty, and how do we help build actual wealth and help like disrupt intergenerational poverty. And one of the projects was the Bronx Exchange, which was looking to working to redirect local spending from institutions into Bronx businesses, locally owned Bronx businesses, minority owned businesses, underserved businesses, and help make those connections. So just left. I was there for 4 years and helped millions of dollars floated to businesses in the Bronx, and helped build a network and a number of initiatives that are continuing. And I'm actually, stemming from that work in the Bronx, we'll be working closely with a smaller cohort of small business and designing a program to really accelerate some community-based businesses, and working help in terms of helping businesses with their marketing, and then also involved in the nonprofits, just in general, the entire ecosystem of organizations. There's many nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, initiatives. So I've been building a platform that serves as a resource for helping everybody in the community of the Bronx see all of the resources, and also understand those resources, and be able to access, because there's a lot of missed connections in terms of resources, for-profit businesses, nonprofit businesses actually trying to reach customers, and vice versa. So that's, yeah.
That's an interesting career path, and impressive. I want to go back to some of the work you did at Teach for America and Charity Navigator, and I think that it continues now. In creating the database, I think one of the things that was done well at Charity Navigator was we had a lot of parameters around the database. There were a lot of instructions about how to enter the data. You built the system in a way that people could understand the architecture. And I think that that's a challenge for a lot of nonprofits, to have a database that works for them, whether it's donors or programmatic data. And can you speak a little bit about that? Because it's not easy to do that work on the front end, but if you don't, garbage in and garbage out, right?
Yeah, that definitely, that's a good point, that how that focus on the user experience internally for us as staff users, to make it as easy as possible, right? Like easy to enter information, easy to go through a workflow for the ratings, and easy to check, right? Like there's different checks and balances. So it was, and I attribute part of that to the thinking about the user experience, and starting with kind of the goals versus the technology. And I see there's a lot of kind of tripping up, I think, regarding technology and the application of it, where there's often kind of there's different perspective, different areas of understanding that people have like they're familiar with this platform, or they're familiar with this, and they start kind of adapting based on just what they know of technology to like what they're trying to do, versus like forget about the tools. Like there's so many tools now, like forget about the tools, like just what is the outcomes, like start with the end and then work backwards to the tool set. And I think that is that was key. That was something, this is before, like when we started, there's no UX design. That didn't exist. Like all of the
agile development, none of it. Yeah.
None of that existed. No. And it was the Wild West on the internet. And but there was something about design that I was coming from the technology. I got into it because I was trying to like do things, solve different problems. I didn't come in through the tech route. And I did video production. I had a small business video on the side too. So I had an eye for kind of design and aesthetics that I think helped, because I was always seeing it through the lens of the user. And it was really helpful being in the office and just watching how people were using the application, right? The internal application. A lot of folks, they see the Charity Navigator website. It's actually really simple compared to the internal app that the analysts, the small team of analysts, are able to use for us processing all of that data and being really confident in the quality of the data too. We had such high standards on like the accuracy of that data, and making it easy for the team to do that. Yeah. Did that,
Yeah.
that answer?
That's like a super important lesson that not everybody knows, right? There's a million technology applications and tools out there, but you got to solve the business problem first and then find the tool that does the things you need it to do. And I think, yeah, we all get excited about new technology and sometimes do that in reverse. And it's even like, just constantly thinking about the end user, like who's coming to your website, what information needs to be there, how are you portraying yourself with your website if it's not up to date and it's not looking professional or, based on current internet standards, all those things. It just runs the gamut. Yeah.
Yeah. And asking and checking in with folks, get that feedback and see what they think. And that was something I really appreciated also at Charity Navigator. Because we were so small, like when people called, do you remember when anyone called, they were like, get one of us, right? So it's like, even though there's at some point millions of visitors on the site and like someone goes to call, it's like, I need help. And like, I pick up. And I loved talking to people that were using the site. And like, not just to solve whatever challenge, I'd start asking more questions like, oh, like what else, how are you using the site? What else did you try to do or would you like to do? And I learned so much through just conversation and understanding more about kind of the motivations and it was fascinating because I remember talking to one of the users of the site who had he had a spreadsheet that he pulled in data from the site, put it in his own spreadsheet, and he had his own calculation. It's like, oh, that's interesting because that could be, it's a feature set. We could, if there's others that want that, it could help make that easier. So a lot from those conversations that I learned. And I remember who did I talk to? There's do you remember a few celebrities that called oh wow, I know
there was like a heavy metal band,
D. Snyder. Yeah, I didn't talk to him, but there was a comedian who called Elaine. I don't know, it's fun if you're 80s had Showtime in the 80s, maybe Elaine Boozler was a comedian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is dating us. Okay, we know. I don't know, Elaine Boozler. I just had a great conversation with her. She was a user of Charity Navigator, and she called because she had a question about something. So I had many conversations over the years that informed from the user perspective.
Which is critical, right? Like I was talking to an affiliate the other day. They have some additional resources that have come in and they're like, well, we just built a daycare facility. What should we do next? They're calling us. What should we do next? We're like, you should ask the people you serve what is missing in the community that they would really value and make your decision on that. Oh yeah. Like it's not that we don't know these things, but you get so caught up in the day to day, you're not thinking from that. But yeah, it's always important to ask the end user, the people you're serving, whether that's internal staff or clients, how can we better serve you? And develop your products that way.
Yeah. And then I think, asking folks, like, what are they trying to accomplish? And like what their vision and what they hope and help tease out the technology, because people could constrain based on what they understand the tech. Like, no, just what, and also just in watching. Like I've done that also recently with small businesses, and just how everything is working in the economy in the Bronx, and just watching how the contracting process or the marketing of their business, or just how things are done, because people will answer differently. Like asking people like how you do something, it's not the same as like actually watching them, because there's a disconnect from what people think they do or why versus oftentimes what they actually do in some task or procedure that they.
So Tim, what's something that you've learned by observing the users that surprised you, that led to a change? And you could choose anything: Charity Navigator, the Bronx, whatever you have observed that surprised you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this isn't necessarily this is like going against tech. Actually, when I came, the Bronx Exchange was already, the idea was created that there needs to be a digital platform that facilitates transactions for these businesses, the small businesses, but it's a B2B, and then the institutions. But when I came in, I I took that as an assumption. There's a site up, but I was like, no, I had a lot of questions about this. And as I then talked to the small businesses and to start develop relationship with institutions, Fordham University, Montefiore Medical Center, these bigger institutions, like the digital part that's not the problem to solve for them. Like the transaction wasn't the problem to solve. There are other problems to solve in terms of just who are the businesses and the capabilities of the businesses. So discovered that there's actually a need for a lot more targeted business support to help them scale up to meet the needs of an institution, right? So that through observing and talking with actually how contracts at this level too, because it's not like Amazon. So, a contract for construction or these different bigger projects, pest control, it's like months of negotiations and RFP. It's not like the platform was the problem to solve, to make the last part of it, the transaction, because many of the institutions, they're still cutting checks. And they're not going to, there's no incentive for them to say, there's no incentive. That wasn't the problem to localize procurement. Like it was more of the businesses actually need to be helped.
So you'd say that you start off thinking that you're addressing one challenge, and then as you're in there, you discover, I might have to adjust. And it's not always what you go in thinking, but it's that open-mindedness. Sandy, do you find that as well? When you start a project, you probably came into Family Promise and were like, here's how I'm going to solve these challenges. But then once you got in there, you were like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. What about you, Sandy?
Yeah, it happens all the time. And I think nonprofits also feel pressure sometimes for funders that have a certain idea of like what the outcome should be. So then you have to negotiate that too. When you find like you really need to go in a different direction, is that funder willing to pivot with you? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have the same outcome, but the way that you approach that, the solution may be totally different from what you pitched to them and they gave you money for. So I think that's always a challenge for nonprofits to navigate. But the projects that work well are when you take that time to listen. And so I'm wondering, Tim, I always felt that you do a really good job with the vision and strategy. How do you prioritize that in your day-to-day or your work week? Because I think often too, small nonprofits, they feel like they don't have time for that, right? They're scrambling, they're all wearing many hats. How do you personally make that a priority?
Yeah, that's a good question. For like me personally, like my vision and strategy.
For the organization, I found like you thought about that a lot when we were at Charity Navigator. You were still doing all the things that needed to get done, but you always had like, we can go here and like we're missing this opportunity here. Yeah.
It's kind of, I have a process of taking in a lot of information, of like just organizing and aggregating information, but creating a reference document. So at Bronx Exchange, at the Charity Navigator, I created these documents to help kind of orient everyone to like, what are the, revisit the mission and vision, make sure that's clear and upfront, and then revisit regularly, right? So it's like on a quarterly basis, the Bronx Exchange set up kind of a quarterly cadence to like checking in on the strategy, right? And like assumptions and like, here's what we were trying to do. Here's what we thought. And here's what we learned too. So building in learning has been something that I've been codifying, right? Like as a key function of what I believe, like all organizations need to become more like the world we live in is there's so much information. We're awash with information, and there are oftentimes at the beginning of any initiative and ideas, there's a number of assumptions, And it's like, a lot of them are wrong. Like most of them are wrong. But you want to find that out, right? Quickly. And that's like coming from software and like Agile, I think there's so much to learn, I think, from how software has evolved and different components of how it's developed, but also open source, like governance, like the culture around it. Like I have no formal technical training in technology. I Googled everything because no joke, I've not taken a single course, like certificate online, Khan Academy, not even that. I've kind of like had a problem to solve and like looked for the solution, and it's amazing what's available, right? Like, so there's a culture too of sharing around technology and coding that has accelerated kind of the benefit to everybody, right? Like now the ecosystems and the platform integrations that enable the pick and choose and to use the best of, right? Or what you already have. I'm going to use Microsoft Teams, and we're going to use Slack, and we're going to use Stripe, and that kind of pick and choose, and the businesses are able to focus on what they do best. So, but the strategy question, this is where I'm like going off, right? It's building in like the revisit to like, okay, why are we doing this? Like, and I also listen to stuff I start my day kind of listening to big picture things. And there's, I think it's a famous, very popular video. So Simon Sinek. Yeah. What's your start with why? Yeah. What's your why? And just remembering that, because it's easy to get kind of caught up in the how and the what and the like, but keep revisiting that why. And I do that with like actual document that helps orient it. Like, so it's like, it always starts at like, here's why here's the mission, vision, and here's why, and at a quarterly level, and then into the details of the plan.
Yeah. It's funny how many times I've encountered somebody who said, like, how do we get this video on TikTok? And then prior to that was, how do we get this on Snap?
Yeah.
They're like, all right, well, why do you want to do that? And often people are fixated on the technology, and the channel, and you say, is that where your target audience is? Is that where the engagement is? And often they have an idea that seems oddly specific.
Right.
Like, how do I get an interactive puzzle on this web page? Why do you need that? Is probably the best question to start with. Yeah.
And we saw, it's funny, Sandy and I both, over the years, right? How many people came to us with ideas, startups? And I had a list. Yeah, it was so many. And it was like the next great idea. And we just need to partner with y'all, Charity Navigator. And we did.
You're like, what's your business model? Who's your target audience? And they couldn't answer those questions, but it was a great idea,
Yes, they have a browser extension. Remember, there was I don't know why it stuck in my mind. Some browser extension, and even well funded. Because I remember one of the Facebook founders launched like
like a charity version,
social media charity platform, well funded, right? Yeah. And it was like. And
drive traffic there because traffic was already on Facebook. Why are people motivated to change their behavior? Yeah. Google Plus, they worked with us too, and people didn't want to switch and go over there. Yeah.
Right. And I really appreciate the Pat and Marion, founders of Charity Navigator, because of the runway that we had to really create value. Right. And focus on the user, because it was a private foundation. Right. So it's like, hey, the goal was to create, a really helpful tool. And we didn't have the pressures, right. Like to create a profit and figure out. And though we did have to pivot to the fundraising, and that was a challenge, but we also there was that moment where we did have banner ads, remember, on the site, and we decided, like, you know what, we're not going to go that route, because we're going to optimize for the benefit of the user and not for the advertising revenue, which is a different designing, right? We're like, let's make the top 10 lists, like, so that you have to click through each one, and so you could stay on the site longer, even though maybe you don't want to stay on the site. You know, like, I think this is a big issue now with the social media, because of the business model. Huge problem, the attention economy.
Yeah. Yeah, we were very lucky in the beginning that we disrupted the marketplace, really, and we had the freedom to do that because we had private funding, and we didn't have to report to a funder in the field that had their own interests, or, you know, some donor, like I don't think Charity Navigator would have come about if we were relating on foundation funding, because everybody has their own interests, and we were coming in to disrupt everything.
Yeah. And after a year, it was like, after a year or 2 years, it would have been like, oh, okay, it didn't get enough traction. It took a while, right? What did we have? 10,000 people the first year or something? And it took time. It was like 5 years. And I think it was the real traction. And I think the disasters kind of marked major milestones. Katrina, the tsunami, there was, those were big. I think Katrina maybe was the first one. It was like 2005, probably.
Yeah.
Now, going back to something that you both were talking about, which was the patience of the founders. And for both of you, like, what role does patience play in building something up from scratch? Tim, you mentioned it took 5 years to really hit the mark on the stride of what you wanted to have. That's a very long time in business, especially today. What role does patience play for up and coming charities that are being grown organically?
Yeah, I think it's huge. And it also depends on what's the need, right? I mean, charity, it's funny because it's such a broad, like, nonprofit. We talk about this charity now because it's so broad.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's there's so many different types in terms of the kind of direct service and relief, and you're like helping people, you know, that are in need. And then also the Symphony is the nonprofit, and and all of these are on our site on charity. Universities and the local, just it's so wide ranging. So I think, I think it varies, because I mean, certain things, there's like, okay, there's just a need, right? It's more obvious need. And then other things like that are less obvious, that are not, like Charity Navigator was. It wasn't, there was a vision. Pat had a vision. He had an idea. He's like, he just had a hunch, right, that this was needed, and he experienced it. And that's really powerful when it's like you're trying to solve your own problem. And kind of when it's a meaningful problem too, like it goes against the culture, right? The venture capital startup kind of culture that has evolved and set certain expectations around like startups and business, and right. And even in the, nonprofit social impact space, it bleeds into, in terms of some of the expectations. But I think really meaningful projects, they take time, and to solve like really big problems. And I heard, what's this guy's name? He leads social capital. He was an early investor in all of the, like, Facebook. Chamath, is it Chamath? Chamath Palihapitiya. I forget his name, but I listen to him regularly in terms of solving really big problems. It takes time, and it takes people that are kind of, it's not for everybody, but you got to find and align with find those people who are like, hey, this really matters. It's going to take time. And this is where the learning there's so much there's so much value in the learning of doing something, right? Like, so as you're on this mission and trying to solve a problem, and you're dedicated in doing it for a while, you're also learning a lot about adjacent issues. Like, it's just so valuable to document the learning. And if everything's always like, oh, this is not going to work, like, it's that opportunity for learning is missing. And like, there's a project that came out of our work with the Bronx Exchange. This is talking about the resources called a platform I started to develop called the Business Ecosystem Navigator, that, based on also seeing the challenges with the resources, I saw like, oh, there's all of these support providers that I've gotten to know, and that being one, and I'm all these meetings and groups that are working to help small businesses. And this isn't an underserved group. Like, it's very difficult for support providers of businesses to like work together and to know what businesses do. They don't have data. There's kind of that audience. I'm continuing to develop the tool for that. That I had no idea. Like, I just discovered this and learned by also kind of being involved for a couple of years. This came after 2 years that I started to.
Yeah, having some time probably helps. Same thing with you, Sandy. You want to just talk about the importance and role of patience?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim hit on it. You know, my organization also deals with intergenerational poverty. You can't solve for that overnight. And we need donors to walk alongside us that are going to give us the runway to deal with that. And, you know, I think we've historically, because it's easy, we can see the number of people served in a year, but that really isn't the meaningful outcomes that we want. We want to know 5 years out, the families that we worked with, are they still stably housed? Are their kids in school? Do they have transportation? Do they have good jobs? You know, all that stuff. And that's harder to do, right? And that takes time, and there's gonna be failure. So I think letting nonprofits experiment, letting them fail, and giving them the time is really critical if we're going to solve our world's biggest problems. If we're just going to put a Band-Aid on it, then, you know, we can do that kind of quickly, but that's not going to change things in the future and make this world better for our children. These are big, hard things, you know, cleaning up the environment, all these issues, they can't be fixed overnight.
Yeah, it wasn't caused overnight. It took time.
Right.
It's not being solved overnight. And I, Sandy, you had a couple of other questions. We're running down those rabbit holes that we knew we'd go on, but Sandy was methodically put together some good questions for you, Tim.
I just also wanted to ask you about, you've done a lot of work around communications, and what lessons you've learned that you could share with nonprofits listening to this podcast. Like, what are top 3 things they should think about around communications?
Yeah. Well, definitely segmenting the audience, understanding the audience, and developing personas, right? The idea of just getting an understanding and grouping in a helpful way, a way to differentiate the different segments of your audience across the board. Like, it's funny because I think about it like completely, like thinking about the board members, as persona for your board, your persona for your donors, persona for your different types of clients or people you serve. Like, because you're more, you meet, it helps you meet people where they're at, based on kind of what they need or are interested in or looking for. So you have to have some kind of framework to help understand all of your stakeholders. And then, and that's a key. I think that's like number one, probably. And then, and also
we did that at Family Promise for the affiliates. So we have 200 affiliates across the country. And I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, because I think I just organized it in my head, but we'd never communicated it out. We just created personas for our affiliates to help new staff coming on board and the board to understand, like, 20% of our affiliates look like this, but another 20% look like this. And then there's 30%, so when we're talking about program and service delivery, like, this type of affiliate is not going to adopt it, but maybe this one is going to be
Right.
ready. And so what are the implications of all that? So I think, yeah, I'm a huge fan of personas. I'm
Yeah.
annoyed I didn't do it sooner for my team, but
Yeah.
I think it's critical, even if it's a rough sketch, even small
Yeah.
nonprofits should be thinking about what does your client profile look like? Who are your donors? Yeah. And who are your board members? All that.
Yeah. I think it should be standard, like how to help all nonprofits and all people that are working with, with people in any, it's just that it's such an important way to think, and just always to understand, who's the audience, and like, what is the goal?
Because
My
you're
goal
going to
for them.
people the buddy's point of view
Yeah.
on different channels
Right.
with different types of messaging.
Right. And you
right?
differentiate. Yep. Because there's certain people, it's like, oh, video is really effective. And like, well, what, types of video? And there's other people that are not on video YouTube channels, and they're looking at blog posts, and they're, the more you could understand all the different variables and attributes, and the channels that make it so it's a whole nother layer, right? Because when we started, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, then there weren't even podcasts.
I remember the
we
first time I
saw
had to
all
get
of
Twitter
that.
for work. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. What am I going to do with this? This is another thing to do.
Yeah. So it's challenging. And that's where technology also helps, like wrangle and create dashboards, right? On to help visualize that. And dashboards, in general, very helpful, so that there's a big picture snapshot, and everybody could kind of see it and get an understanding. So that's, the segmentation, the storytelling is very important. And that's something I'm working on in the Bronx as well, because there's so many stories of success and inspiration that are just not told, that just telling the stories would inspire others in ways. It has a multiplier effect, and seeds inspiration and ideas for people. So just helping tell those stories, and Family Promise is great with the stories that about the work and about the impact. And that's why
I learned that at Charity Navigator. People give from the heart, like that's their first. You have to start there. But then, of course, the place that Charity Navigator came in was, where's the data, and can I know for sure this nonprofit is going to do good things? But it always has to come from the heart. So if you're not doing a good job at storytelling, it's going to be very hard to get more people under your tent.
Yeah, it's that balance, right? You want to have the data and the stories, and the trust is so key, and that's what we clearly proved at Charity Navigator, how important, and it's become even more, right? It's such a commodity currently, right? Like there's a distrust. There's a lot more distrust. So being transparent and accountable, and I think being, there's always a balance, right, with vulnerability, but it's important to share the learnings. I'm gonna really get into this, and this is my personal as well. I'm because it's so, that's how you create trust, right? And it's so easy with marketing. I think about this a lot, like how the tools are so available now, right? Like I went to school for video production. It was $20,000 machines I had to use to create a video, and it was still VHS, and it looked, anybody can create amazing quality, right? Like production quality, but that means you could also manipulate people really easily, because the tools are so abundant, and then that, bad actors then help. It messes it up for everybody, right? So, and so just kind of addressing in communications, the storytelling, the data, and the vulnerability. Like, hey, this is what we learned. We tried this. We thought this. It didn't work, or we were wrong about that. And now we're trying this, because I've seen that now in working. Like some organizations, it's difficult, and like the funders also can kind of the culture funding can contribute to this in terms of like, stick to the story, stick to the we funded this. And it's different from business, where it's like all the funding comes up front, and then it's like you got to get to this, it's got to be spent like this, and then you start learning like, ooh, we didn't, and it compromises, right? If you don't have the it's not comfortable to like share learnings, like, hey, listen, that didn't work, let's pivot, let's adjust this. And that's, I think that's a learning edge for nonprofits.
So Tim, real quick, just to get back to something you had mentioned very early on, you went to Marist, go Red Foxes.
Yeah.
You went to Marist for video production. So you had a formalized education in storytelling, and you learned technology. What did your formative years in storytelling and education give to you, especially as you became higher up in the organization?
I think there's techniques in video production that I think translate, and I think the way I was talking about like the starting document and starting with why and like big picture, like similarly in video production, like the establishing shot, right? Like you help orient people when you're watching, like where am I? What's going on? And then you get into more detail. Like when you start close up, it's like, it's disorienting. So I think those techniques in video production, I think about how in business communication, because and seeing it too, how there's often a big disconnect between like, oh, the idea and the vision, and then what people think they should be doing or why, and they don't know why. Like the folks that are charged with executing in an organization if they don't know and really have that understanding of the big picture, they don't have the latitude to adapt and adjust to hit the outcome they're going for. They're just trying to like stick to that plan, right? Because they don't have the context, they don't understand. So I think it's really important to help communicate that understanding throughout the org, so that everybody knows the why, and then it pushes the decision making down it allows you to push decision making down more and more, because and more latitude to be creative, to solve problems.
Entrepreneurial,
down into the org. And a lot of tech, this is also where tech companies, because I started studying with tech companies while I was a charity navigator, because I stopped looking at like just nonprofits and then looked at technology companies as they were able to innovate quickly, and they're experimenting with different models and creating, and going from the waterfall and software development to the agile, and like having, you want a product manager and a designer and a business, you want teams of people, not like throw the requirements over the fence and then, you see there's a lot of, there's certain sites, government sites that I've been to that are like, 25 years old. They really have been updated. And you can see the disconnect and how like there were some requirements thrown over to the engineers. But that's.
So Sandy, we're getting close on time. Have time for maybe one more question?
I don't know, Tim. Is there something
something to wrap? Something that
I'm like
that you bring Tim has the best answer for.
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Well, I mean, if there's time, I can tell you what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Like, and this, it's more broad. I think there's a time. I think it's interesting because watching, over the now, I don't know how many years, since the teacher around 30 years or so, and the nonprofit space, a charity navigator, and so much has changed. And I think there's I think it's a step back moment, right? For organizational leaders and some of just even these concepts. So we're talking about nonprofit versus for profit. Like there's so much has happened there where it's like, they're coming closer and closer. right? You get public benefit corporations and the B Corps, and then nonprofits. Used to think of charities, but oh no, these are big entities that are now have tech. There's even, you know, completely tech focused nonprofits that, and they're much more sophisticated in using technology and everything, and all kinds of nonprofits. Like look at, you know, churches, even they're putting on massive productions and like have CFOs, you know. So there's this moving. So I think like there's so many different types of entities, and I think it's opportunity again thinking about like outcomes, and then like what's the best model for it, right? Like, and it's not as clear as like, oh, nonprofit versus for-profit anymore. It's kind of like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then downstream of that is more like, also I would look at like, take a look at it, what's going on, because there's a lot of different, we talked about this at Charity Navigator, right? Like just creating like your own, first, like kind of look what's out there. You may want to join something out there, and also collaboration. Like I think that's key. Like the collaboration across organizations in a community, looking for areas of synergy and working together in new ways, and reconfiguring as well. Like it can be constricting that like organizations get started, but then it's just natural. They then become like, part of it is like, they're just, it's fixed, right? They could be too rigid, but there's, I think it could be more agile and like, hey, we should partner and we start a different organization or an initiative. And I think again, software
technology has helped change that.
It's helping that.
It's so easy to find a partner where 20, 30 years ago, you didn't know that potential partner even existed. Right. And now you can send them a DM and have a conversation tomorrow and partner 3 days later. You know, like it's just a different environment. Back in the day, you needed to unite a way to broker all these relationships. And now we can do it ourselves. I know Family Promise has been really good about relationships and outsourcing. You know, if we don't do something well, let's outsource it. Or, you know, if we don't have those skills at the affiliate, let's find a partner in the community that does. And I think I'd like to see more authentic partnerships with corporations just across the board. We have some really good ones, but, you know, I think we've all seen those missteps where they're not authentic. And, you know, it's like just kind of giving lip service to a cause. We need more companies to really, you know, change their practices too, so they're not contributing to the problems.
Yes. And that's actually where another kind of project incubating, coming out of this ecosystem navigator, thinking about the more accountability even more accountability on the corporation side and how they're working in communities. Absolutely.
Well, that seems like a great point to end this on. I love the concept, Sandy. As usual, you led a great discussion, and you knew how to get the best out of Tim. And Tim,
I could talk to Tim all day.
Yeah, you can.
You guys are great.
Yeah, for those of you just listening on audio, these guys are, you know, they're giving each other cues. They know exactly what they're going to get from each other. So that's the power of partnerships and relationships. And thanks to the magic of LinkedIn, we were able to reconnect. Tim, where can people find you and what you're doing on either the web or social media?
Yeah, that's funny because I've been thinking about that. I've been really quiet. I'm like about to start talking because I feel like I'm just at this point over a number of years where I've synthesized. I have some ideas that I want to share, and I'm about to. So, I have an account at LinkedIn. Certainly, the website, the new website's elevatedigital.nyc. There's beacon.network, BECON.network. But where I'll probably on LinkedIn most of all. So just Tim Gamory on LinkedIn, you can find me there.
for our audio friends, we want to spell that last name?
Oh, sure. Gamory, Gamory.
Perfect. And Sandy, where can they find or follow you and your organization as well?
Yeah, familypromise.org, and you can go on there and find your local affiliate if you want to volunteer or contribute. And I'm on Twitter at Sandra Miniutti, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
So you can find me and this podcast at the 501c3lookup.org website. And of course, I'm always on Twitter at Buddy Scalera and my own website at Buddy Scalera. And we hope that you enjoyed the 501 Companion podcast and consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions, show ideas, or part of a charitable organization that wants to be on the show, visit the 501c3lookup.org website. You'll find our information and a complete list of our previous episodes. And of course, the extensive and free resources that are at the 501c3lookup.org website. Thank you for joining us on the 501 Companion podcast. We hope you join us again next week for the information and inspiration to take your charitable mission to the next level.
Awesome.